Welcome back, everyone. I'm Julia, your host of the Mentorship podcast, a series that features diverse industry professionals. We mentor you by highlighting different fields and going through every step of our guests' academic and career path, from high school to their current role. We are so excited to be back. This is our premiere episode of season 4, and we are introducing video formats. We are really looking forward to interacting with you more on YouTube, which is where you can find our video episodes. So please subscribe or follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. We really appreciate your support. In today's episode, we are joined by Sarah Jenkins, a sport media producer, content creator, and the host and producer of Talking Fast, a Toronto-based podcast. Sarah received her Bachelor of Arts in Sport Media from Toronto Metropolitan University. She is currently working as a producer in strategy and special projects at CBC Sports for the Olympic Games. In today's conversation, we get into a career in sport media and production, as well as its challenges. And Sarah also tells us how she expanded her career into content creation and social media. So now, here to mentor us, it is Sarah Jenkins. Welcome, Sarah, to the Mentorship podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I like being on this side. It's the first time since I've launched my own show that I'm on this side of it, so I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to ask you all the questions. You definitely have accomplished so much in your career so far, and I know that people listening would love to learn everything, especially about production and sport media, which is mainly what we'll be talking about today.
Awesome.
Just getting an understanding of who you are, I'll start first with asking you, what did you want to be when you grew up, and what kind of things interested you?
That's so funny. We were literally talking about that at work today.
Really?
Because my colleague said he was envious because I've always known I wanted to work in media, my entire life, some form, I think it evolved. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a talk show host because I was I get to talk for a living. That'd be great. And then at one point I wanted to be a writer because I was you get to be creative. And then that evolved into wanting to do television, news or entertainment. I wanted to work at Much Music. That was the dream.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going to sports after concussions because I couldn't play sports anymore. So I started just thinking I could work in sports, and then I was able to merge kind of everything that I wanted to be when I grew up into one job, which is kind of cool, which I didn't know what a producer was at the time. You don't really learn about that in school.
Yeah.
So then I somehow ended up kind of doing everything I wanted to when I grew up, which is great, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so you were a sport player,
I was a hockey player, so I played hockey my entire life. I thought I'd go to school for hockey. That was kind of the pipeline, but I had 7 concussions.
Wow.
So my doctor went, no more, and my mother, they were like, no more.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was in my grade 12 year that I kind of had to make the decision on what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to the RT school in media. I always knew that, but the sport media program had popped up just as I was applying.
Oh, wow.
And my dad was like, why don't you apply to that? Then you can do both. You can work in sports and still have that love of hockey.
Yeah.
And then I got into both, and I ended up going with sport media. So,
Okay. Well, even before that, I was going to ask about, because it's so interesting when people kind of want to go into a non-traditional kind of route. And I say non-traditional because we don't learn those kind of courses in school, right? Especially in high school and before. Yeah. So as somebody who, even for me, I was interested in editing. I love video editing since I was in elementary school, using Movie Maker and stuff.
Same.
So in grade 11, I got to take ComTech, which was kind of did a little bit of everything, communications technology. So a bit of Photoshop, photography, video editing. But that was kind of the only exposure that I had. So what about you? Did you have any exposure more on a formal level, either volunteering even during high school?
Not really, a little bit. I was very much had to create my own opportunities. I'm from small town. I'm from Cobourg, Ontario. So there's only, at the time that I lived there, 17,000 people that lived there. And I went to the more artsy high school, so we at least had a film class, which in film class we got to essentially make YouTube videos all day, which was really cool. Nice. And we learned about how to use iMovie and how to animate and that type of stuff. And I knew that, but I had a fangirl Twitter for Justin Bieber.
Stop.
When I was in
So did I.
And for One Direction. I did both.
My gosh.
Yeah. So fangirl Twitter. And I always say there's the fangirl Twitter to marketing/media pipeline, because I was always on the internet, working in entertainment, doing stuff in entertainment and media. And I was obsessed with New Music Live and Much Music. And I would like spend my babysitting money to get on the GO train to go to Toronto so I could like go to New Music Live and stuff. And that's where I wanted to work. So I guess that was my exposure, but none of my exposure came from like formal like growing up. Like we didn't have Rogers TV. We didn't have anything I could like volunteer for. I remember when I applied to sport media, they were like, what's your experience? I'm like, I wrote an article for the newspaper one time. And then I used to work at the local radio station as like a co-op in high school. But that was my first like actual, and that was like grade 11. So that was like my first actual like exposure, I guess, but nothing earlier than that. And I like always knew I wanted to do media. Like since before that, like in 8th grade, I wrote, directed, and started my school play. Like I was like always doing that type of stuff. So I always knew it'd be something creative.
Okay. At least you got the co-op experience.
Yeah,
too.
that was like, thank God. Like I was very lucky. It was a very small town. Like my next door neighbor was the guy that ran the radio station. So he was like, I'll drive you every day. It was perfect. So he would give me a ride. And then I would spend my first, the morning of the day there. Which was great. I did a little bit of everything. I did voiceover work while I was there. And then like one afternoon, they're like, we need an afternoon show host. So Sarah, I guess it's you. Like it was that small. Like it was so tiny. But it was really cool. And then that like showed me radio, which was really interesting. I learned how to edit audio actually. So that was kind of like my foray into like podcasts and stuff, even in editing that format. So that was like my earliest exposure, I think, though, for like professional.
So let's get into your university period of your career. You kind of mentioned it already, how you ended up going into sport media at Ryerson, now called Toronto Metropolitan. So was that kind of like your main option, knowing that TMU was kind of like a hub for radio and television?
For sure. So when I was in 9th grade, I went to this like CTV open house. So CTV basically did this, or Bell Media did this thing where like you could go to like their offices and studios in Scarborough and like walk around and like see the studios. And for me is like, and I don't know, my family, we just thought that was so cool. So my parents took me there and I met Seamus O'Regan, who at the time used to host Canada AM. He doesn't anymore, but at the time he did. And I asked him, I'm like, how do I have your job? I was like 13. And he was like, go to the RTA School of Media. And that's all he said. And I didn't know what that was at the time. But then from that point on in high school, I was like, I'm going to RTA. I'm going to the RTA School of Media. And then as I was applying is when everything changed. It was no longer just like media production. They switched it into 3 programs: media production, new media, and sport media. Okay. So I applied to 2 of the 3. Got into both, sport media and media production, and I went with sport media. 1, because my hockey career just ended, and I thought like maybe I would always want to go to the Olympics. That's been my dream forever. So I was like, that could make that happen. Yeah. And 2, I knew I was going to be part of the first graduating class, and I just like, even in high school, strategically knew that would come with more opportunities, and that it would be a smaller class. I was used to small classes. Like my high school had like 450 kids, so I wanted the like small class size of only like 60 students as well. I just felt like I could stand out a bit more there, and it was like the best decision I made. Yeah,
I went to TMU too, and it was definitely interesting. I feel like our years were probably similar. I started in 2014.
Same.
And so just being a part of something that was still developing, still evolving, you got to do a lot more. We've actually had someone on the podcast who did go to RTA, and her name's Stephanie. She did media production. And so I'm actually happy to have both of you be on the podcast, because it shows how much you could do, how many opportunities.
For sure.
Because she's actually in tech right now, and she took more of like her digital media aspect of it, and she's doing like product design and things like that.
Yeah, like I know people that like do everything from like write children's television shows to work at massive marketing firms, work at tech startups. Like there's literally like you can kind of do anything, which is crazy.
Yeah. So I want to hear about your time there as well, in terms of, can you tell us a bit about the courses you were taking and just the lifestyle at TMU as well, and RTA, and what you were learning?
Yeah, the course, it was so interesting because we were the first graduating class. We always called ourselves the guinea pigs, because we were the first test run on every single class, and we kind of dictated them what became the curriculum after, based on like our complaints or whatever, if we liked it. First year is pretty general. Like you do a lot of like general classes. I feel like that's like a TMU thing in general, but we didn't start moving into like actually television production and stuff until second year. And then we had TV labs. TV lab would be like a 6-hour class where you're literally just making shows and producing content, which was like the best, because you just get to like play and have fun and kind of create whatever you want. Those were my favorite classes. I also took a lot of business courses. So we had like business of producing, which taught me about tax write-offs and how to make a TV show or a movie, and how, if you go film in like Sudbury, Ontario, you get like 25% back from the government. All these like little niche things that I feel like are actually way more tangible now to my day-to-day life. We did a lot of writing courses, also like issues in sports, theories of sport, social media, you name it, I took it. I took editing, Premiere Pro editing, which was like probably the fundamentally most important class I took. Like having the best part about that program is it's a mix of hard and soft skills. So you're getting like a university degree, but you're kind of getting a college experience with the tangible hands-on classes and learning, which that's the only reason I have a job today is because I've been able to like do both. Because I mean, it's no surprise, like everywhere's getting smaller. So if you're a producer that can also edit, that can also make social content, whatever it might be. So luckily I got a pretty well-rounded education that way. I still had to take like electives that, I mean, I'll never use like comedy writing or like random things that I just took or history of film or whatever. But I felt like I got a really well-rounded education, which was really nice. And because my classes were small, I was always with the same class. Like there was like 60 of us and we were always together for our like core classes, which is great because then you get to like learn who you work really well with and everything as well.
What about the sport side of it? Like how did sport media come involved with it as opposed to just like media production?
Well, we were like totally separate. So like our TV labs were like sports television. And so like our shows obviously were just like all sports shows. So we learned how to make like a highlight style show versus on the other side, they're learning how to make like sitcoms in media production, which I actually would have loved to do. I wish I could have taken that class too, but it would be like, we learned how to make a highlight show or a draft or like things that you would use in like sports, I guess more so. A lot of live shows. We had to do live productions. So I used to be a play-by-play commentator for women's hockey actually. And like that was one of my jobs and you could volunteer and do that as well. So yeah, I just say it was pretty similar to like a general media program, but it was just obviously all of our things that we did were sports specific. But then I got to take some general classes like editing and such as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so speaking of the volunteering, what kind of volunteering opportunities or extracurriculars were there? Because being at TMU, there's probably so much, and being downtown too, you have a lot of access.
Yeah, I did a lot. And I feel like your university experience is like what you put into it is what you get out of it, right? So I was involved a lot. I did university fairs. I like vouched for sport media. Actually, my colleague today, she was telling me that like she went to the university fair and I was the one she talked to about sport media, and that's how she chose to go into the program, which is hilarious because I work with her now. And so like things like that. I used to work for the university fairs. I used to do run the interviews for the RT School Media when they would do interviews. I would also do the hockey broadcast specifically. I would sometimes do basketball and stuff sideline, but mostly hockey. I also worked for the Rams live productions where I would send out the call sheets and do the production schedule and whatnot, which is very tangible to what I do today. I also was on the course union for a couple years. I also was on our we had like an award show, which is the most pretentious thing about RTIs. We like basically do our mini Oscars. They're called the Terras. And I was like on that for 3 years. So I was an awards manager. I got to do all like help plan that award show. So I was always doing a lot of things, but I feel like that's how I got to meet more people outside of my bubble. Cause I feel like, I don't know if you felt this way at TMU, it's very big school, but a lot of commuters, and it's very easy to be sucked into just your group of people you have class with all the time.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because I was gonna bring that up, how I took sciences. So like I never saw so many of the sides of TMU that you probably saw. Like I didn't even ever go to any sports games,
which is crazy because it's like that's such like a core part of my experience. Like when the basketball team finally won the OUA championships for the first time, we like stormed the court. Like that type of stuff was just like such a core part of my university experience. I truly think the only way that I was able to like have such a well-rounded experience is because I did so much that wasn't just in my program. Where I have friends that are like the only friends they got from university were like our same group of people from sport media, whereas like I'm happy that I got a more well-rounded experience in that. Yeah.
What about co-op or internships? Did you have any access to that, and even potentially working with the different hubs in like downtown too? Yeah, so I never did we didn't do co-op, but we did have internship. But I actually got my first job at CBC because of school. My first instructor ever was Karen Sebesta, who was an executive producer at CBC Sports at the time. And she liked me, so she offered me a job. And so I became a production assistant in May of 2016. So then going into the my first Olympics, which was summer 2016. So I was only like a second year when I worked my first Olympic Games, which is kind of crazy. And then I got to work my second Olympic Games when I was in fourth year. So I just used that as my internship because I was like, I'm already working, so I'll just use this. So I was very lucky that like the cool thing about that program was because it was new and because the instructors all were still working, like you truly could like get a job from being good at school, which like I feel like isn't normally how it converts unless you're going to something that's like grades based. Like me being good in class and like
standing out and doing good ideas and like being very creative, like literally is why I have the job I have today, because she saw that and was able to give me a production assistant job out of it.
What did you work on for the Olympic Games at that time?
Rio, I was a research assistant on the morning show. So I had to wake up at 2:30 in the morning and get ready and then go to work and print off all like the rundowns and all that stuff. And I would show up with research packets for the producers so that they knew what was going on their show that day and key storylines and stuff like that. And then I would also have to research in real time. I basically was like a Googler. Like what would happen is our host, Ron McLean, would be like, oh, I remember this thing happened, I think in the 70s. Sarah, can you look it up? And then I have to look it up and confirm for him, like if it's accurate or not before he says it on air.
Right.
That was my first job. And then I got promoted for my second Olympics to an associate producer, where I got to be in the control room, which was way better because I was in a windowless room in 2016, which was depressing. But I was in the control room and I was like part of the show. I got to like, I did research, like similar position, but it was in the control room. So it was more like in the moment helping develop the stories and like what we were putting on air, which was really cool. And I got to be in for like big moments like Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer's big skate and like cool things that were very iconic for Pyeongchang, which was great.
And since you were already getting exposed to kind of what you envisioned for your career, you were already doing it in university. Did it kind of live up to what you thought in the way that you were able to merge your passion for sports and your passion for media?
Yeah, for sure. I also just like love adrenaline, and there's no adrenaline rush like live television or live anything. And so I think like getting into the control room was really what changed it for me, because that really felt like when I was just in a windowless room Googling and talking to someone that's in Rio, but I'm in Toronto, didn't really necessarily feel like the Olympics. Like I was still so excited, but it wasn't until Pyeongchang that I was really like, oh, like this is it. Like this is, and it's not even just sports, just like the Olympics has always specifically been the dream. So getting to be a part of that games was really what like changed it for me.
Okay. So as you were finishing university with all these experiences, what was your plan for when you graduated?
So I was like, I always seemed like a poster child for like TMU, because I was like the exact like pipeline of like, you get a job directly at school, which I know is very rare today and not most people's reality. But I actually walked out of my last exam and walked into my first real full-time job. So at the time, actually, I had another professor reach out to me and say, hey, like my old student is looking for someone to hire at Yahoo Sports. They want like a really young person that knows how to do all these things, and I want to put you forward. I'll connect you and you can email him. So then I applied for that job, and it was actually between me and two of my classmates for this job. And then I actually went to CBC and was like, could you like maybe match it, like if I get this full-time job? But they couldn't, because it was a producer title, and that was the thing that I was like, okay, this is my next step. Like if I had stayed at CBC that entire time, I definitely would have been a producer as young as I was. Like it takes a lot longer when you're staying in the system to work up. So, and I wanted something new. Like this job was at Yahoo was specifically like digital content, which I loved. And it's what I've always loved. As I said, like the fangirl Twitter stuff, like just social is like what I was craving and missing from just working in television. So I applied for the job, got the job. And I started like immediately right as school was done. I didn't take a break at all. I started right away. And then I was in Vegas at like the Stanley Cup like playoffs like 2 weeks later. Like it was just kind of a whirlwind being thrown in. I was the only woman on that team, and there was only 8 of us. Like it was a really tiny team, and I was like 22. Like I wasn't even 22 yet. I was only 21 when I started working there. Like I was a baby. And so it was just a whirlwind. And like it's so funny because I look back and I thought I was so old and mature starting that job, but yeah, it was my first like big girl job, and I was very lucky that I like was able to go directly into, I maybe in hindsight wish I would have given myself a little break, but yeah, I went right into working at Yahoo Sports.
And since you mentioned how you were the only woman on the team, is that common in this industry? I mean, I know pretty much every industry is male dominated, but how was it for you at the beginning of when you started, and how have you seen it change as well?
I think in hindsight, like, so if you would have asked 21-year-old me or 22-year-old me, I'm fine. They treat me the same. I just like now in hindsight, like look back at things and go, like maybe that wasn't necessarily how I would have handled things now, as like who's been some of this managed people or this or that. And I felt really like appreciated on that team and everything like that, but it was less actually even maybe about the being a woman. It was like the age thing. I was so much younger than everyone else working there, like at least 7-8 years. I've definitely seen a shift. I don't think the whole like there's no women in sports thing is as accurate anymore, but there is an issue with like leadership of women, like because, and not just women, but like people of color, like it's still all the like you can diversity hire as much as you want at the bottom and have like women and like BIPOC individuals that get hired, but then the issue is that's all like entry level positions. That's where the issue still lies, I think, and has always been, as opposed to because there's no like management yet, because it's like they're just catching up. Sports is always behind the 8 ball too. Also, like, it's just about, it depends on where you work. Like, covering a lot of men's sports at a place like Sportsnet or TSN or whatever, I felt it a lot more when I worked places like that, rather than like CBC. We literally have a 50% women's sports coverage mandate. A lot of women work at CBC. I don't feel that same pressure, but then I am aware of the fact that I'm still only one of the only female producers. Like, it's still part of it. So I don't know. I think it's shifted for sure. People talk about it a lot more, but it's still like not great. But I also think it actually starts way more grassroots level of like, I think things like the PWHL are amazing because then like women see careers in sports on the ice and off the ice, whereas I never even saw that. Like, my dad had to be the one to be like, well, you can work in sports. I was like, no, I can't. What are you talking about? Like, you don't realize. So yeah. I think it starts a lot more grassroots. Like, I don't think we can solve the problem with like a Ryerson sport media program, or TMU, sorry, sport media program. Yeah. Like, I think it starts way younger, but it's getting better. We don't talk about it as much, which I appreciate, because I feel like it's like a buzzy topic that people like to do.
Yeah, no, it's still definitely, like, even being in chemistry.
Well, sciences, like yeah. It's women in STEM, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, definitely, like, pretty much all the labs I've worked in, it was like a 20 to 80 ratio.
I'd say ours is, yeah, I'd say it's most of the companies I worked for that, despite CBC, like, honestly, CBC's, like, different, is 70-30 maybe, 80-20. But then again, it's like, you have to think about what position are these women in, because like the thing I hate the most is when they're like, we do have women that work here. They all work in finance or in HR or in like scheduling, and not in decision making positions. If you look in the boardroom of the men making all the decisions, that's what it is. It's all men. Like I'll sit in meetings where it's like a bunch of executive producers and I get brought in as like the token young person to like give it an opinion or whatever, which I appreciate that they bring me into those meetings. They see the value, but it's still like, meet a bunch of guys that are my dad's age. And so I think there's still a lot more work to get done in keeping women in these industries, as opposed to like them getting to a certain point and wanting to leave because they feel like they've hit their ceiling.
Yeah. I mean, definitely they're gonna be forced to evolve if they haven't already at least started. Even with the evolution of media as well, it's not just television anymore. It's, digital media too.
Exactly.
So with that comes a different demand and more cause for change too.
Exactly.
So I also wanted to kind of ask, what you touched on a little bit, was just kind of like the stigma that production can have, at least that I've seen growing up as a career, where it can be kind of unpredictable in a way, because let's say you're working on a show and it gets canceled, then you're out of that job. Or it can be competitive because let's say you're going into hosting, there's only so many hosting positions, only so many TV shows, especially in Toronto. So I kind of wanted to hear your take on that too, in terms of like the unpredictable part of it or the competitive part of it. How has that been and how have you navigated that?
Yeah, so like I got laid off from my job at Yahoo on a random Wednesday in December of 2019, which was like at the time like the most devastating thing that could have ever happened to me. In hindsight, I'm stoked it happened. Like everything ended up way better. But at the time I was 23 years old. I was at a job where like I was like head of the Women's Inclusion Network. I had like a mentor who was like a vice president of content down in the States. Like I was like on track. If anything, I thought I was gonna be moving to the States for this company. I was like, oh, like I'm like corporate girly, like rising through like the whatever. The one thing I was very grateful for though is that like the sports media community is very small. And I at least kind of made a name for myself in that space. And so the second that happened, I just sent out a tweet being like, I was part of the layoffs, blah, blah. And then by the next week, I had a meeting with every single major network in this country.
Wow.
I ended up cramming because it was right before Christmas. Met with everyone before Christmas. They didn't want to be forgotten. As if people like, you become relevant in 2 weeks. Like that time I thought I would be. And then I was actually started back at work at CBC before I would have started back from break from Yahoo. Wow. Like I started back like January 2nd, and I was producing TV and as a producer and balancing freelance between there and Sportsnet. But it is a very like volatile industry because the pandemic happens, and obviously that's an extreme situation. I totally understand that, but I was a freelancer, so I lost my work again.
Wow.
So I think you have to be on your toes and understand that not everything is forever. I mean, it's also no surprise CBC announced recently that they're gonna be laying off 700 people.
Oh, wow.
And so for me, I've been through it before and I land on my feet, so I know I'll be okay if I am one of those 700, but I understand the stress of that. That's really stressful if you've never been through it or you don't understand that this is kind of how the industry goes. And everyone tells you that. They're like, oh, that's just media. Everyone gets laid off. Everyone does this. Doesn't mean it's right, but like that's just media. But until you experience it, you don't really know what it's like to be like, oh, but I was good at my job. And they're like, no, that's not why you're getting fired. It's just like random. And it's really hard to decompartmentalize that. But I was, in hindsight, I'm very lucky it happened to me young. So then I kind of changed my perspective on work-life balance and working for companies and like how much they value you as well.
Yeah. Well, what about your freelance work? How did that come into the picture? Did that start while you were at Yahoo and you were able to carry it over?
No. I was full-time at Yahoo. So it was, once I got laid off, I had sent out that tweet. I met with all these companies. They were basically all offered me work. So I created a freelance schedule for myself based off of that. So I started working 7 days a week, like legitimately 7. And I was at Sportsnet 2 days a week. And then I was at CBC 5 days a week. Okay. And then I would like freelance a little bit with like Uninterrupted. And I would freelance a little bit with like this editing company out of the States that I was working for. Like I was working more than when I had a full-time job when I was freelancing, because I was just so stressed, I think, about money and making sure I was making it.
It's also really interesting that you were working then as a producer at CBC, because you had mentioned that.
Yeah. So if I had stayed at CBC, I wouldn't have become a producer by the time I became one. But because I left and was a producer, when I came back, it's like, oh, well, she's a producer. It's her job. So, it's really interesting the way it worked out. And then that even came with a pay raise, because the CBC producer rate, because it's standardized, was even higher than what I was making at Yahoo. I was like, oh, I lost my job. You paid me out and I'm making more money now? Amazing. Like, that kind of worked out very well. At Sportsnet, I was working on their original content team, so I just helped make like digital YouTube videos, which is great because it gave me that fix of the type of stuff I used to do at Yahoo. But I was only there 2 days a week, so I could never really like feel part of the team, because like day one, you're like trying to catch up on everything. Then day two, you finally make something that's like, okay, guys, see you in a week. Like that part was hard. I never felt part of the culture there, and that's such a big thing for me, is feeling like part of a team. And then at CBC, I was producing rugby sevens on the weekend. So I was producing live television. I literally went from like creating YouTube videos and podcasts to then live TV, and I was stressed about it. But I did not enjoy going back to doing that. It just like, I didn't love that job. And I said that to the people at CBC, and luckily they immediately were like, we'll find a new position for you. We're opening a digital studio. We'd love for you to oversee it. And then that's how, once pandemic hit, I was just in a waiting period until July, when they gave me the okay for the full-time job in the digital studio.
So you gravitated more to digital media.
100%. And it's what I felt most confident in. And look, like I see content as content. Like I think all content can go on all platforms. You just have to adapt it to each platform. I think any of the stuff that my digital studio team was making was quality enough to go on television. I wouldn't make it otherwise, but it's just almost seen as different teams. And it's like an old school way of creating content versus a new school, I guess.
It makes sense that you, as someone who's younger generation, understands our generation more, would want to gravitate towards digital media.
100%. It was just like a no-brainer. So then when I found out they were building a digital studio, I was like, that's what I want to do. Because at Yahoo, it was very similar to what I did. We had a studio at Yahoo, and I would like run the board. I would like operate it. And I used to use my TV skills at Yahoo. It's so funny. I used to use my TV skills at Yahoo to help run their digital things. So then at CBC, I was like, I'm the only person here that has experience producing television and digital productions, and that's why I got that job, because I was the only person that had done both. They had never had someone, so for a long time I felt like the little bridge between TV and digital. But it was my first full-time gig at CBC.
And what do you do now with CBC? Can you talk a little bit about your current role and what your day-to-day looks like with CBC? Yeah,
so I was in that role as the digital studio producer for 2 Olympic cycles, so like 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And actually just recently, last April, I was like itching for some change and something different, and our team's rapidly grown, and I just felt like I had outgrown that role. I had been doing it for so long, and that job was a lot of daily assignments and just like reacting to news, whereas I want to work more like long-term and on the Olympics specifically. So again, I kind of made up a job for myself, which I've done twice now there. And I now work as a producer of special projects in digital. So I specifically work on like World Championships, the Olympics, Pan Am Games. Like when we have like a major event coming up, I make the strategy and plan for content and schedule of what we're going to do. The Olympics obviously being the biggest one, so that's coming up this year. And being like on the ground. So I'll be on the ground in Paris this year, which will be my first Olympics on the ground, which is really exciting. And I'll be overseeing our digital shows that we're doing. We're doing a live show from there every night, and then any other content, going to events and shooting. I'll be like the lone digital producer there, so it'll be a lot of work, but it'll be very fun. So I'm just working towards that. And then all of our lead up content, so I'm producing all of our original series that promote Paris and going to those games and that experience, and like kind of promoting our athletes and stuff. And I also hire people, so I just hired our host and stuff. So yeah, I'll just like the long-term strategy and outlook for Paris is my main job right now.
Yeah, production is kind of basically like the organization of everything.
Exactly. So it's just, we never had somebody that was like looking ahead. We were always just kind of all like eyes down, looking at exactly what's in front of us. And then like literally for 2 Olympic cycles, the Olympics would come, we're like, oh shoot, like what are we doing? It'd be like 2 weeks before we're like coming up with concepts. Whereas now we're actually able to sell our shows because I've been working on them for a year and a half. Or like we're actually able, it just helps everyone overall, because like the Olympic unit plans 2 years in advance. We were never doing that. So now that I'm in this position, I'm able to plan. And now I manage projects, not people, which helps me balance my social media life on the side as well, because that like it was too much to do both.
On that topic of social media, I did definitely want to ask you how you ended up transitioning or expanding into content creation, especially for so long being on the other side of it. How did that come about?
It came out of unemployment. So my first actual introduction to TikTok specifically, because that's the platform that like I am most known for and blew up on, I guess, is I was working at Yahoo at the time, and it was November, right? So I got laid off in December, and I had pitched my boss like, oh, I'd love to like take over the TikTok. Like it's this new platform everyone's on. Like I'd love to like oversee making stuff for it. And he told me it would be a waste of our time to have another platform that's like not doing great. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I actually started vlogging and making videos as of January 2020. Because I was like, oh, if I'm freelance, I want to be employable. I'm going to learn this new app. So I learned it literally just for the purpose of like being employable for other positions. And then when I lost all my freelance work in March of 2020, I was like, I need a reason to wake up in the morning. So I mandated myself 3 videos a day, and I woke up and made 3 TikToks every single day, 2 vlogs, like 1 like whatever other video. And then I started seeing a lot of growth, and so I just kept doing it. And then I came to like my full-time job again, and I had like 40,000 followers at that point, and then like was starting to be known more as like this girl from TikTok, which was weird. And then I've always just since then balanced both. So I've vlogged my life every single day. I've only missed a couple days since like March 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And how was it now kind of creating content for like more like lifestyle, I would say, right? As opposed to you've been working in sports for so long, which you still are, but kind of like now delving into a whole other side.
Yeah, the biggest transition for me was making content about myself rather than about other people. Like, it's weird to produce yourself, which is what I do. Like, when I'm watching back stuff, and it's like, I look at myself as this, I'm like the talent that I would normally produce. It's very weird. And I did some on-air stuff when I worked at Yahoo, so I was like used to being on camera, and that part I wasn't worried about. But yeah, it was it's been a weird transition. And to this day, it's like 2 different sides of my brain. Like they're both creative, which is exhausting, right? Because it's like you're constantly having to think of like creative, and like that takes up a lot of brain capacity. But the weird thing is like switching on and off from like me being the person that people are there to see versus like the product or whatever else that I'm like working on for like the Olympics is the product that I'm selling, as opposed to then I'm like now literally selling products. So it's like a really weird like medium. I always say it's like my Hannah Montana life, and I like literally put on my blonde wig after work, and it's like, okay, like now I'm Hannah as opposed to just Miley at my day job. Like it's I truly feel like I live in 2 different lives, and it's been that way for almost 4 years.
How do you see that evolving?
I mean, I think it's, even by the way I've like been speaking, it's to no surprise that I'm someone that's like clearly very like ambitious and a go-getter, and I don't plan on working for other people for the rest of my life. And I would tell anybody at my current job that, they know that. Does that mean anytime soon? No. Like I love where I work, I love the people I work with, I love the projects I get to work on, but eventually I want to be my own boss. I want to evolve and create more types of media. I want to create new things. I want to create films, or like, I mean, I create a podcast, documentaries, whatever it might be. So I think what's going to evolve into is the work I've done through TikTok and social media and sharing that part of my life is going to allow me the freedom down the road to be able to do more of whatever I want. Yeah,
there's definitely like so many doors open, so many opportunities.
And it's just made me like, it's so funny because it's like, I don't know, I don't really like to think right now more than 2 steps ahead of me, because it's just like too overwhelming that way. But I'd love to continue still growing on different platforms, and in the platforms I'm on too, like try new series or evolving into like other niches and areas too, as opposed to just lifestyle vlogs. So we'll see. I don't even know yet. Who knows?
Well, especially with your background, like there's so much that you could apply
for sure. And well, and the nice thing is about the way I've done TikTok, because it's just my life and it's just vlogs, like I would say whenever I have a new hyperfixation, like that becomes my new niche. Like nobody can tell me that I'm like not making stuff that's inauthentic to myself, because I started running this year, so I started making running content. I only really started reading 2 years ago, and then started making book talk content. So some people see me as a book creator, some people see me as a running person. Yeah. Sometimes I share work life. Like when I'm on an Olympics, I share what it's like to be working 12, 15-hour days, and like what I do after my work day and that type of stuff too. So it's kind of funny. I feel like I'm known for so many different things, because it's like anytime I get a new hobby, I'm like, well, this is my personality now. So, and that goes the same for work too. So like if I was to ever like shift careers or like anything happens on the road, like the nice thing is with the way that my content has evolved with me, it can also just like continue to do so.
Yeah, like if you weren't to just solely focus on sports.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I was going to ask too if you kind of showcase that inside perspective of your producer life too.
So I used to post like literally the Tokyo Olympics. I vlogged every day at the office. Like I vlogged during work, but then it got too gray. Like I started making money off of TikTok, right? And so I just wanted to church and state it. I'm very lucky that I'm able to do both, and I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me.
Yeah.
So I just was like, nope, we can't do this anymore. And also like, I don't know. It just like was like my work life should be my work life, and then my other life should be my other. And the thing is, like I talk about work. People know where I work. It's not like it's this like hidden secret. It's just that I don't showcase that. But like I was in Budapest for 2 weeks in the summertime on a work trip. But what I just did is whenever I wasn't working, I showed my morning routine before I go to work, or when I get home at midnight after a long shoot day, this is what my life looks like. So I still find ways to incorporate what my producer life looks like without actually showing me producing. Also, showing me producing would just be me on a laptop. Like that's very boring. But the Olympics will be interesting, because I think I'll show a little bit more. I'll have to, because I'll be too exhausted otherwise not to, and I can't go a month without posting on TikTok. So we'll see. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet, but I've separated the two. Because again, I don't even just want to be known as like a girl that produces sports, right? I want to have like the full picture, and yeah, well, especially when you're building a community and people are gravitating towards you as opposed to just what your job is. Exactly. As I evolve and change and grow, people will stick with me instead of being like, oh, you don't make sports producing content anymore, then like see you later. Like I've never really had that, luckily, because my audience grows with me, which is I'm very grateful for. And let's talk about the podcast. So your podcast is called Talking Fast, which I've done on this podcast too. I think talked fast, but we were able to get everything in, and that's all that's important. That's all that matters. And it's coming up to a year now. Right? I'm recording my 1 year anniversary on Monday. I think it's next week is our 1 year, which is kind of crazy. Exciting. Yeah. So tell me about how that came about, and just how that's going, and what you learned from that process too. Yeah, it's weird because like I produce it and I'm the host of it, and I've only ever produced podcasts in the past. Like I produced like a ton of shows, like podcasts specifically. So it's weird being on the other side. It was always exciting though. I always wanted to try it. I felt like it was a medium that I really like could excel at. I like to talk fast, I talk a lot, and I have a lot of opinions on things, and like a 1 minute TikTok was never gonna and like also even like a YouTube video of me sitting down, I don't know, it just never felt conversational enough if I was like talking to a camera. So I felt like that was the best medium. Yeah, because you have a co-host too. Exactly. I host it with he's actually my like manager for like TikTok manager, Jacob, but he's also like one of my like very good friends. Like he's the best. So we host it. It's like our little buddy cop duo, which is great. And we just like chat with different people. I just also feel like because I've lived so many different lives, and I still live so many different lives, I feel like I meet a lot of very interesting people. So it's kind of like the perfect place to like bring all those people together into one space for conversation, because I don't know, like I have friends that are like artists, I have friends that are radio hosts, I have friends that work in sports that are creating like women's pro soccer leagues, and then I have other friends that are influencers, and so I think like getting to talk to people of all walks of life is like really exciting. But I don't really know what's going to come about it. Like I'd love to interview more like like, you know, at the beginning I told you I wanted to be a talk show host when I grew up when I was little. So like this is kind of getting to be a talk show host for me. And so like bridging my love of like music and like that whole Much Music era is like what I would love to more so incorporate into the podcast. I get to show my like pop culture entertainment nerd side of me. So I think this year that's what I'm going to try to aim to do a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed the podcast. I'm sure your audience, everybody kind of has a different perspective, but for me, I've kind of seen it bridging and merging the Toronto community in a really unique and nice way.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Because there are a lot of creators, especially on social media, who are from Toronto. And I don't know how it's like in other cities, but I feel like you're actually able to interact and build that community even off of the apps too.
For sure.
A lot of them do like events, like wellness events or like closet sales. I got this at a closet sale too.
Oh, I love that.
From one of those like community events. So I feel like your podcast has been a place where we can bring that community together even more so too.
Oh,
like,
I love that. No, and it's so cool because it's like, I feel like a lot of these girls, maybe like they're big on Instagram or like the fashion girlies that like, you might look at their Instagram and be like, they seem like intimidating or whatever, but it's like, I get to go to events with them and get to know them, and like, they're the sweetest souls on the planet. So it's like, why not give them the opportunity to like showcase that side of them a little bit? Yeah. And so it's been really fun, and just like, I just get to talk to my friends, which is like so fun, and just get to like dive deeper, or like, I don't know, like I think it helps show another side of people. Or as an example, like most recent episode, my friend Kate, she just quit her corporate job after saying like she didn't want to ever quit her corporate job. Then 6 months later she quit it, and now she's doing the creator thing full time for now. And it was great because I don't know where else she would have had the opportunity to really dive into that decision in a long form conversational way, and we were able to do that, which was really awesome.
Yeah, it's been really nice seeing it evolve, and I feel like this is a great place for me to ask my last question, which is, what are your hopes for your future career development, and what do you hope to achieve?
That's a big question. Oh my god.
We touched on it a bit. I feel like
I've used the word actually a lot in this interview, but like every year I give myself like a word that I'm going to use as like my mantra for the year, and this year's word is evolve. So like I don't want to change as a person, I don't want to change my career, I just want to evolve in all areas of it. So that's kind of the first step. My biggest career goal has always been to go to the Olympics, so the fact that this is happening this year is like a big check mark. And then after that, I don't know, I have other dreams and aspirations down the road that I don't know if I'm going to do next year, in 5 years, in 10 years. I want to work in film one day. Like my best friend and I love film, and we want to make rom-coms. That's literally the dream down the road. Wow. So that hopefully will happen one day. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. Like I'm not putting too much pressure on timelines anymore. I think like getting laid off so young in my career really helped me realize that there's like no timeline for like how your career is going to go. So I don't know, world domination. Eventually just like truly working for myself completely, and just like, I'll never forget, like I did first year of university, and like they were like, oh, like we had to write a little essay on what we wanted to, like who we wanted to work for. And I remember putting up my hand being like, what if I don't want to work for anyone? Like how do I, like what am I supposed to write about? So I've kind of always had that mentality. And my friends always remind me of that. So I think one day just like working completely for myself is the end goal. And I don't know if that's going to happen tomorrow, 5 years, 20 years from now, but I'm not holding myself to a certain timeline for it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome that you had that in mind from such a young age.
Always. Yeah. I remember working at a beer company, and this like loser guy was talking to me, and he was like, well, what do you want to do at like the company? And I was like, well, why would I be at a company if I don't want to become the CEO? And then he laughed at me, and then I threw a drink at him.
That's a good way to respond.
Yeah, because I was like, what are you talking about? Anyways, that's like, I've always had this like ego mentality about it. It's good though. It's the only way that I'll be able to like keep pushing through to do it.
No, I feel like you need that in that kind of space, because even with me starting a startup, I'll be talking to people about what it's like, and you get really mixed reviews, right? Yeah. Like, I hate when people are like, so what do you plan to do with that? It's like, you got to see the vision.
And the thing is too, like what will happen is it's the same as like posting on the internet, like TikTok. It seems so cringy when you're like, and you feel cringy doing it when you first start, but then the second you have a little success, everyone suddenly thinks you're cool and it's not cringy anymore. But you just like, it's like if you're not going to vibe with me at the bottom, then like not at the top, right? So it's like, then once you're going to be successful in it, then people will be like, oh, that's so cool. Like, how'd you do that? You're like, well, I told you when I was struggling and in the middle, you know what I mean? So I think, you really have to have a strong, like, confidence and, like, head on your shoulders to be able to create anything. So I'm excited to see what you make. That's so exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I'm so happy to have had you here, especially for our first round of video episodes. So.
I'm excited. I love the setup, so it's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your time and talking with us today and really mentoring us in this career. And I can't wait to see what you do going forward.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Sarah for coming on the Mentorship podcast. This was such a great opportunity to highlight the field of sport media and learn about all the different avenues of Sarah's career path. I had so much fun talking with her in this episode, especially from one Toronto podcaster to another. If you want to connect with Sarah, the links to her podcast and social media are in the episode description. Now that we are introducing video episodes, we will be posting bi-weekly, so we will be back in 2 weeks with our next episode, which will be featuring a scientist-astronaut candidate who is in the field of space medicine, so be sure to tune in. In the meantime, follow us on @MentProjects on all social media platforms for updates and more mentorship resources. Thank you so much for listening.